Okay, so this is like the beginning of the Holy War, of taking the land.
Yeah.
And it's also important to see how God gave them detailed instructions. And again, Moses, he isn't able to go in the promised land because he messed up with detailed striking the rock, just like following it the way it's supposed to be done. And that whole generation now is not going to be able to go into the promised land.
Yep.
And basically for their disobedience and adultery and hardened hearts and all that sort of thing. But it's interesting how God takes his vows seriously, and that they're to travel through here and not interfere with what's Esau's possession and what's Lot's possession, because God had set that aside for them.
Yep.
And he still honors that. And it's interesting too that Esau and Lot's people, even though they're coming from Jacob, and Lot's covenant goes all the way back with Abraham, they weren't a part of Israel where they were in captivity in Egypt. They're not coming out of Egypt. They've already taken possession of what their inheritance is. So this 400 years that's gone by, these guys have lived in, they didn't experience the slavery of Egypt. They didn't experience what Israel experienced. And Israel's coming through, and they're doing every their way not to be in conflict with them. Whereas, even when it said with Esau, like in verse 4, that they will be afraid of you, so be very careful, because if any of these tribes were afraid of you, they would take up armed in defense and be ready to, go to battle. And so they would do that. So they were actually like going out of their way to avoid that. Because God commanded it.
Yeah.
And then we get to, and I like to, where it's like, rise up and set out, a command. And it's very, very military going on. We know how Israel is traveling and all this. And it's very strategic and very military-like. And we also know that they're a very large group, and they outnumber a lot of these communities that they're going through as well. They could have been prideful and not paid attention to God's commands of not messing with the Esau and Lot's possession, but they, like I said, they obeyed it well, and they went how they were doing it. And then they come into King Sihon. It's not really brought up in this passage, but these people, it's located on this King's Highway, and it's a major trade route. And so again, they weren't looking for a battle. They're asking, hey, can we get through here? We're not going to go to the right or left. We're trying to get to where we need to be.
We just want the shortest route.
Yeah, we're just trying to travel and get to our destination, And, but again, his heart, King Sihon's heart, is hardened just like Pharaoh's was. Mm-hmm. And basically, it's a thing about, we could have a whole discussion about free will. And we do have free will. And just like Pharaoh, he could have let those people go at any time. And just like this king, he could have let them just pass. But there's something that God does when he hardens a man's heart. He gives him over finally to his corruption. Yeah. And so his heart is hardened because his separation from God and their corruption. And obviously he became hardened and becomes obstinate, and it's to the detriment of his own people, just like Pharaoh was, about destroyed Egypt, And again, it's an example of looking back at Egypt again. That was them coming out of slavery, and it is all by the hand of God, without a doubt. And here it is now, they've been out of slavery for 40 years, but now they're on their way into the promised land. And God gives them completely over to them, and to the point where they left no survivors. And that's just because of their corruption. It all had to be wiped away. God had had been patient, I imagine, for a time. And then finally, when the nation becomes so corrupt, and then the leaders of that nation's heart is hardened, and they harden against God, then God wipes them out.
Yeah.
He almost lets that come to its fullness, And not to say he didn't have free will, because God hardened his heart. It's just at this point, he was so obstinate. God.
Yeah. It wasn't like out of his character, out of the blue, that he was like, oh,
yeah, I think
I'm gonna harden you.
It's like when you come up against God like that, when you assert yourself in that way, and you do it over and over again. Like, I think what happens in that process is you get more puffed up, right? You get more emboldened.
God did.
The more you come against God and it doesn't just strike you down, the more you think to yourself, this God is nothing, right? And I think that's the thing, is that once those things start building in your mind, that this God is really nothing, that I'm smarter than this God, or I'm bigger, or whatever, it's like, once that builds in your mind up to a certain point, there's no coming back, right? Like that is, and I'm sure, like, God, that can happen. Like, we've seen people be transformed by God, but it's very rare. The trajectory usually is that, like, it's not going back, and I think he does. He sees that. He sees what's going on, and he's like, okay, I'll give you what you want. He even gave the Israelites what they wanted many times. Mm-hmm. Why wouldn't he do it for people who come against him?
Mm-hmm. Tim Haig's commentary, I like that he pointed out too, as a reminder of God's plan through this and preparing for Israel to take over the land. This was told to Abraham, that you would be in slavery, that 400 years, that the Amorites' evil deeds have not, or whatever it was called, their depravity was not complete. And so we are now continuing to see God's word and what he prophetically said was going to happen. This is what's taking place at this point.
And I wouldn't think that Esau's and Lot's inhabitants was probably aware of Yahweh and what Israel was. They might have been aware of it. But these possible. Men, this group, they didn't know Yahweh at all. Just like the king of Pharaoh didn't. And but I imagine Esau and Lot's descendants tying back to Abraham, that they would have been aware of who these people are traveling to them, because the stories being told, ahead of them coming, people are aware of, and it's all being done for Yahweh's glory, and I like how when they first go to the king, they're asking him, we're just going to go through to right or left. We're just trying to passage through here, right? Because then they say, until I can get over to Jordan, unto the land that the Lord our God is giving to us. They're on their way to get what God is giving to them. And it's interesting too, it's like now this next generation is moving forward in hope, that the generation they just had to leave behind would never experience that,
Well, I think it's interesting to think about, like, also the idea that, like, when you look at that generation before and look at what they lost, it's like you'd have to be taking a good look at yourself and going, we better not do the same thing. Mm-hmm. Like, and so even if you didn't have the courage, it'd almost be like, well, even if I don't have the courage, like, what else are we going to do? Because if we do what they did, like, we get nothing. Like, we don't get to experience anything good. And I think there's something about that whole having that experience and knowing what happened for their parents. Essentially, it's like we're not going to do that.
Well, and also,
even if it costs us a lot, we're not going to do that.
Moses is relaying this to them again. Like it's all being reiterated again for a purpose, because it's like if we don't rehash what took place, we're not going to really be aware of what's taking place. And I think that's part of us. The cliche, like if you don't learn,
we got to
know your history.
Remember.
To repeat it.
And that's like you said, like a good teacher. That's all I can do is just reiterate.
And we know they're going to go back into captivity again. So it's like, but you are destined to repeat this if you don't pay attention.
Yeah. Well, it is, and it's interesting though, because like I think what you said is true. It's like at the 39th year in the 11th hour, it's like, or 11th month, whatever you want to call it, but it's like when there's nothing new that you can say. What are you going to say new that you haven't said in all these years that's going to get them there? It's like the only thing you can do is like go back and review and be like essentially saying to them, do you want the same thing? Do you want to keep doing this thing?
Yeah, because think about how they went out of their way to avoid the conflict with Lot and Esau's possession. And that they could have, like the previous generation, they would have come up with excuses to go the fastest way. So they're on the right track right now.
Right.
So despite it not being the most convenient way, we're going to do it. Lord says,
It's like he says, keep doing what you're doing. Like keep on the path you're on. Like keep doing it this way.
Yeah, back on that, I was on Genesis 15:16. Was that reference to where that the land of the Amorites wouldn't be given to Israel until its wickedness had come complete. And here we are seeing the fulfillment of that, just as he was fulfilling his promise to Esau a lot. And as we go forward, because he's claiming the land, more people will be destroyed because it has to be purged out. And again, when it comes to justice, it's only God can understand why it's necessary, because normally in battle we would have survivors, and women, but for him to have to wipe out it all because God commands it, it's his justice.
Yeah, it's not ours.
Yeah.
Well, and I think what's interesting too, if you think about it, it's like we hear the scriptures about God saying, judgment begins in the house of the Lord. It's like that essentially had happened in Israel. This whole thing that we're hearing him retell is how God had to purge all of Israel to get this next generation to where they needed to be to fulfill his promise, to bring their children, their Abraham's descendants into the promised land. And it's like he purged his people before he's purging these other people. So there's that piece too, is that he's not doing to those people he didn't like just obliterate and kill all these people. He slayed lots of people along the way. But he didn't slay his people. But in this case, it's the same outcome. He's purging people that are coming against him essentially, and are going to present problems if he doesn't purge them.
Yeah, it's justice on earth.
Yeah.
And we know that in the future there'll be a heavenly justice as well.
Yep.
And it's not that because he doesn't have love for the wicked, it's just that wicked cannot exist. Their free will is what got them to that point. So it's just.
Yep. And especially, the other side is if they, just like, we do see down the road, it's like, one, they don't utterly destroy everybody. We're still living with those problems now. So there's that. And that's what he knows. That nobody else apparently could get their minds around. Like, if we don't destroy every bit of these people, that this will eventually destroy
It'll be a cancer.
all of God's people, and it'll be a cancer. And people wonder why we have such rabid, crazy anti-Semitism, and it's like, well, because all those people weren't destroyed. And that sounds horrible, but it's like that's part of the reality.
Well, they're trying to repeat some of that in today, where they're like, okay, Hamas, just put your weapons down, and we're going to recognize Palestine, and everything's going to be peaceful. And just like, that's not going to happen.
History repeats itself.
Yeah, history tells us that's not going to happen.
Yep. It's a nice thought.
It's kind of interesting in the news this week. Some
Because it's
guys
worked
had
in the
brought
past,
it up.
right?
But when Britain and a couple countries were talking about creating a two
Recognizing Palestine.
recognizing Palestine and dividing the land, and all those discussions were going on in New York City, and then within 24 hours, New York City gets a strange flood. And they're like, y'all are in there planning to divide the land, and God takes that a little serious.
Mm-hmm.
But we're seeing a lot of, like, where we are today, politically, what's going on. It's just like a lot. We're coming to a crescendo, it seems like, in the Middle East.
Definitely.
And when he does return, that judgment will come with them, and then we're seeing what he's going to be doing. He's going to be setting up new boundaries, So it's interesting.
Yeah, I don't remember which prophet it's in, but one of the prophets talks about this God giving land to Edom and Moab, but then says that will come to an end. Whereas the land he gives Israel is permanent for as long as this earth exists. But he said eventually that because Edom was so hostile to Israel, when they could have just been nice and then had a good ally, then he's going to take their land away and destroy them. But that doesn't happen until many centuries later. And that's actually fulfilled by the Maccabees. After they kicked the Greeks out, then they went and attacked Edom and destroyed them too.